We are in the midst of the rapid rise of the social enterprise. A social enterprise is best defined as an organization with a mission which combines profit-making with respecting and supporting its environment and stakeholders. At last count in 2017, there were about 20,000 social enterprises in Australia, with annual growth projected at around 5% a year. Australia is ranked as the second best in the world for setting up a social enterprise, right after Canada. It's no surprise to me that an Australian is behind efforts to lower barriers for other social entrepreneurs across the world to set up their own social enterprises. In today's episode, I speak to Tom Dawkins, co-founder and CEO of Start Some Good, a crowdfunding platform for those with ideas to do good.
We're a crowdfunding platform and agency dedicated to increasing the pace of innovation for social change, and that makes us quite different from our peers and has led us to make a bunch of design decisions that are really kind of specifically about how you help new people bring their ideas to the fore and begin to participate in creating social impact.
What can we do? In this podcast, I speak with those who are putting their ideas into action, focusing on the good they can do for their neighbours, communities, citizens, and the world. In this episode, you'll hear about Tom's personal journey, how Start Some Good helps social enterprises, and Tom's observations of the industry. Tom and the Start Some Good platform have been central to starting many social entrepreneurs on their journey, so Tom is well known in Australian social enterprise circles. As a child, Tom understood the value of having your voice heard because he'd witnessed the impact when others had it taken from them.
I must have been 8, I guess. It must have been about 1987, just to date myself very precisely, because it was the year before the bicentenary in Australia, which is 1988, 200 years since white settlement. And I remember this piece of graffiti that we drove past that said, "Don't celebrate 88." And I was shocked. Why would you not want to celebrate 88? I'd heard nothing but, that this was important and this is what we're going to do. And my parents explained to me that there are some Australians who don't celebrate that date because to them that's the invasion of this country and the beginning of a true cultural genocide that, of course, we're still recovering from. And I think that was really eye-opening to me, to suddenly realize that there was this other story underneath the story that I've been told. And I think that began to, even at that very early age, I think that has stayed with me. And I think that there's always, that ultimately to me is kind of almost what power is, and it's what privilege is as well, is taking for granted that your story matters and that people want to hear you. And so many people don't have that privilege and don't have that opportunity.
This stayed with Tom into his teens. He was selected to enter the State of the World Forum while on exchange in America.
And what was so amazing about it wasn't just that we got to meet and hear from these incredible change makers and leaders, but that they wanted to hear from us, that they wanted to know what we had to say. And obviously, I didn't really know anything about anything at that time, but I was willing to give it a go and participate in these conversations. It honestly changed my life. And I think that's what is at the heart of empowerment, is discovering that your voice matters. And the only way you can ever discover that your voice matters is to have people listen.
Tom knew that he'd been able to attend this life-changing forum simply because he was the right person, at the right place, at the right time.
Every single one of us had parents who could afford to send us to America for a year, or if we wouldn't have been there at all. And it got me thinking a lot around how do we make this kind of an opportunity experience less haphazard, less tokenistic, and less biased towards wealth. And that's a journey I'm still on.
Tom recognizes that of everyone who wants to make an impact, only a few will get the chance. In Tom's experience, visibility and voice almost always fall to the majority. Soon after graduating, Tom set up VibeWire in Sydney, a business focused on young change makers. After 8 years at the helm, Tom moved on to his next phase.
I finished up on my 29th birthday and moved to America for 4 years. I spent the first 2 of those years in Washington, D.C. as the first social media director for an organization called Ashoka, who fascinatingly invented the phrase social entrepreneurship about 45 years ago. And then I spent 2 years in San Francisco. And it was in San Francisco that Start Some Good was born. And that's not coincidental, because San Francisco is the most vibrant innovation ecosystem in the world. Well, the Bay Area, I really mean. And I was fascinated by what are the characteristics of an innovation ecosystem. And then I realized that so many of those characteristics are in fact missing from the social impact funding ecosystem, and ultimately found Start Some Good.
Prior to our interview, I was reading over an email from Tom. In it, he categorized Start Some Good as being in the business of democracy and making the world a better place by giving everyone an opportunity to lead change or make a social impact.
And partly that's because I think that a lot of the best innovation when it comes to social change comes from people with a lived experience of those challenges. But those people don't usually come neatly packaged with all the right set of skills in terms of pitching and marketing and sales and fundraising that is needed usually to kind of get an idea started and raise the funds you need to try new things. And so we're trying to fill that gap for the social impact sector.
The first step was to ease the initial burden for many social entrepreneurs: funding. Investors might well be available, but they are few and far between. Many investors are risk-averse and don't see social enterprises as an avenue for significant return on investment.
I was really inspired by Kickstarter because I felt like solving a very similar problem, but for creative entrepreneurs rather than social entrepreneurs. But it was still a kind of a gatekeeper issue. That in the social sector, we had this world of gatekeepers, which were foundations and corporates and governments, the funders, deciding what was worth trying at all and doing so in a very risk-averse way. And in the creative sector, that was record label executives and so on. And that created massive inefficiencies. That's how you get stories like the Beatles getting knocked back 90 times. That's how insanely inefficient the record industry was, identifying good innovation in terms of things that didn't sound like everything else. And we're kind of in that world now still for a lot of social impact, where stuff's getting knocked back 90 times because it doesn't look like what's come before it. But of course, that's exactly what we need. If you don't think the status quo is acceptable, then what we need is things that don't look like everything that came before.
Aside from providing a platform for crowdfunding, Start Some Good supports these social entrepreneurs with practical workshops, online programs, as well as annual summits.
We want to both provide the best possible technical tools to build community raise money, but pair that with the best possible coaching and training opportunities so that people can get really familiar with everything that goes around those tools. Because it's great to have a tool to distribute your story, but if your story makes no sense, it's not ultimately going to go very far.
Start Some Good also partners with traditional gatekeepers to help them become less risk-averse.
These days, the considerable majority of our revenue is not through the platform directly, but through partnership work, working with those gatekeepers, helping reinvent the gate in many respects, helping them get braver and smarter about how they fund early-stage innovative social enterprises and community projects. And so we run kind of impact accelerators and match funding programs for ING and the City of Sydney and City of Parramatta, and City of Canning and THL, the world's biggest camper van rental company. We did a project with this year on looking for community-led projects that leverage outdoor experiences for social impact, because that's obviously their area of passion. So these days, it's actually kind of helping people do that better, helping funders and other people who want to support innovation, but who justifiably need to figure out new ways of doing it. It does require that the challenge is moving from, I guess, that really purely analytical, metric-led, show us the numbers and we'll decide if it stacks up kind of approach to this is exciting, seems kind of high potential, great team, let's give them a go. And then running, our model has someone like an ING, say, with the Dream Starter program that we run for them. They put in the first half of the needed funds, but they're conditional on them being able to raise the remainder from the community through Start Some Good. It increases the benefit to the funder by driving a lot more awareness and engagement while reducing the risks because it shares the funding burden with the community. But it also requires that, it forces that entrepreneurial organization to get out there and prove the community really want it.
Tom has a unique vantage point of this industry, thanks to his role and his involvement for over 20 years. He believes social enterprises are experiencing a massive upswing, becoming the new business as usual.
And that's been driven by a number of things. The kind of cultural trend that is driving that in general is people wanting to make an impact now. And so this idea, people used to think a lot in terms of leaving a legacy. That's just not a concept that has very much cultural currency anymore. It's not about leaving a legacy. It's about actually living your values now. And that means I think that increasing numbers of people are increasingly looking at how to express and live their values through every part of their life. And so becoming more conscious of what companies they support, focusing on working, trying to get jobs for companies or organizations that provide meaning and purpose.
Tom's observation is that the desire to express and live values cuts across different generations.
It is true that, when I visit kind of university-based entrepreneurial programs, even when they don't have an overtly social focus, you tend to find that 85% of the companies are social enterprises anyway. With all of this stuff, I think what you generally see is that young people reflect back the way in which societies are shifting. Young people are almost never the driver of cultural change, I don't think, because they actually are shaped by the culture they're growing up in. You can't, they're not like outside it, affecting it. They're absorbing it. Certainly in our programs, we see people right across the spectrum. I think there's actually a lot of people who are more mid-career, I think, and come to social enterprise from either side. They're significantly into their corporate career and they're going, is this it? Is this all there is? There's got to be more to it than this. I want it to mean more. And they start looking to bring in that social element, either inside their organization or starting their own or shifting careers. And I think the same thing happens from the other direction, which is people who've been in the traditional not-for-profit or welfare sector also thinking, is this it? Is this all there is? Just this endless kind of treadmill of doing the same thing and delivering the same services? How can we actually scale this? How can we make it, how can we be less dependent on government? How can we be more sustainable and so on, and been attracted to businesses as a possibility of doing those things?
Women are making the most of opportunities in this industry.
The most recent statistic I've said is 72% of social enterprises in Australia are founded or led by women. My co-founder is a woman, for what it's worth. To be honest, I think kind of structurally in our society, women have often dealt with social issues more directly. They've often been thrust into roles as carers or have dealt with all sorts of things that go along with that. And I imagine there's some sort of connection there around that lived experience, but certainly that is a strong trend we see.
At the time of this recording, Start Some Good has helped 1,078 projects on their platform with over $10 million raised. Tom reiterates the importance of lived experiences when setting up social enterprises or technology for good.
Well, certainly that problem can exist with people who are, 21 and doing a business degree and think they've got the solution to helping women fleeing domestic violence or something that they have no experience of whatsoever and have never spoken to a woman who's fled domestic violence. But you also see 55-year-old bankers thinking that they're the perfect person to sit on the board of a homeless services organization despite knowing nothing about homelessness or never having met a homeless person. And it's why, it's why we think it's so important to kind of lower the barriers of entry a little bit and provide that on-ramp to people of all ages, but who do have a real insight, often based on their life experience, that travel, time spent with people, their personal circumstances, whatever it might be, and trying to facilitate their opportunity to tell that story and to have people listen.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please rate or follow this series on whichever podcast service you're on. Another great way to support this series is to follow me on Facebook or Instagram. Just search for What Can We Do podcast. What Can We Do is an independent podcast series produced and edited by me, Prema Menon. The script editor for this series is Lisa Nadolski, and the audio you're hearing has been sweetened by Nicholas Allaire.